Hello, 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 my lovely listeners. Welcome to episode 172 of the Assist with Impact podcast. I am so delighted to bring you this week's episode. It is my interview with the wonderful Dr. Kirstin Ferguson. Kirstin is an author, columnist, and company director. And she is here as my guest on the Assist with Impact podcast to talk about her latest book called Head and Heart, The Art of Modern Leadership. Now let me read you her bio. So, Dr. Kirstin Ferguson is one of Australia's most prominent leadership experts. Kirstin is also making a global impact, with UK-based Thinkers 50 naming her one of the world's top 30 thinkers to watch. And she was shortlisted for the Distinguished Award in Leadership in 2021. Kirstin's career includes 3 decades of leadership experience, including a previous appointment by the Australian Prime Minister as acting chair and deputy chair of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, the ABC. Kirstin has previously been the CEO of a global consulting firm, was a senior executive at a leading corporate law firm, and spent nearly 10 years as an officer in the Royal Australian Air Force. Kirstin's second book, Head and Heart, The Art of Modern Leadership, has been described by #1 New York Times bestselling author Adam Grant as a timely, actionable book on the virtues that every great leader needs to learn. Kirstin writes a popular weekly column for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age called Got a Minute, answering the nation's work, leadership and culture questions. She also contributes to the Financial Review. A passionate advocate for women, diversity and inclusion, Kirstin was responsible for sparking a viral social media campaign called Celebrating Women, and is the co-author of award-winning book Womankind, Unlocking the Power of Women Supporting Women. So, lovely listeners, you know that I am passionate about what I call your power skills, those supercharged soft skills that elevate you out of that order taker zone. And one of my power skills, in fact, it's number 4 on my top 10 list, is revealing your leadership. So when I read that Kirstin was releasing her book, Head and Heart, The Art of Modern Leadership, it was right up there on my books to get my hands on. And I'm very pleased to say that it was no disappointment. That's what I'm trying to say. It was no disappointment. It is chock full of great insights and practical tips. And what I really love about it is that the leaders that Kirstin includes in her book are not only corporate leaders, business leaders, but they are people from all walks of life. And you will hear me talk about that in the interview with Kirstin today. And that's something that I think really is very special about this book, is that it really is a great example, this book, of a book on leadership that is very much demonstrates how leadership is not just the something that is the realm of people with a headcount, with headcount responsibility. In the book, Kirstin really, really dives into the fact that we can all be leaders. And that is something that I really, really believe in. You know that that's something that I believe very strongly. So in the book, Kirstin says, if we continue to accept leaders are only those with formal titles and responsibilities who manage or control others, then we continue to exclude rather than include most people who are leading in their lives and workplaces. Such a definition means not accepting a nurse who acts with compassion in a dying patient's final moments as a leader. It means not accepting that teachers, parents, or entrepreneurs starting their business on their kitchen benches are leaders. Modern leadership does not depend on formal notions of fellowship. Such a narrow definition of leaders ignores the informal leaders in our organisations who may not have formal authority, but who are looked to by those they work with to guide the way. And that, my lovely listeners, is you. And that is why I wanted to interview Kirstin for the podcast so she could share with you her thoughts about her book, and she could share with you why you are leaders in the roles that you perform as administrative professionals. So with no further ado, I would like you to listen to my interview with Dr. Kirstin Ferguson. Hello, I'm Liz Van Vliet, and welcome to the Assist with Impact podcast. Join me as I explore the competencies and capabilities that allow you to assist with impact. I'll be sharing practical tips, strategies, and insights that will help you move beyond what I call the order taker zone and be that little hinge that can swing big doors. If you're ready to be more proactive and have more impact in your role, then this is the place for you. Let's get started with the episode. Well, Kirstin Ferguson, thank you so much for making the time to join me on Assist with Impact.
Oh, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much. I know your listeners are a group of leaders that often don't hear from other leaders, and I'm really keen to remind everyone who's going to be listening today why it's so important that we do focus on your own leadership.
Well, that is a wonderful way to start. So listeners will already have heard my introduction, and they'll have heard me describe you the way that Stuart Crainer and Des Dearlove did in From Thinkers 50, where they said of you that you are a fearless champion of women supporting each other in the workplace. And they will have heard me talk about the fact that when I was on Twitter, I was a big fan of yours, and I was a big follower of you in 2017 when you were doing your Celebrating Women campaign. And I was really interested to know that during that period when you were promoting the importance of women's stories, you promoted 757 women in 37 countries. So congratulations, first off, on that achievement, because aside from anything else that we're going to talk about today, I just want to congratulate you on that, because that was a really wonderful thing that I found out about you in researching you for this podcast episode.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a pretty unexpectedly rewarding and incredible year, but it was a real honour to celebrate so many women. And it's important to know they were women from all walks of life.
Absolutely.
Every woman is a role model, and so there was no qualifying criteria or anything like that. And so it was such an honor to celebrate women we often don't hear from.
Yeah, so wonderful job. So let's start with something that I get all my interview guests to do, which is, as you know, I will have shared this in the intro, which is your bio, but I'd love for you to just share with listeners a couple of those key moments on your career spider frame, those pivot points, a couple of those moments where you had those moments where you could have done that sort of Robert Frost, there but for the grace of God, gone in one of either direction. What were a couple of those moments for you?
Yeah, so a bit of a sliding doors moment, I guess you mean. I have them all the time, and it's only in hindsight you can look back and think, oh, imagine if this hadn't have happened, or if I had got that opportunity. When I left school, I was debating whether or not I would go and become a journalist or join the military. And so that was a bit of a sliding doors moment, very different occupations. And I ended up going into the military because they paid you to go to uni, and, it was all very exciting. I went off to ADFA. But it's funny, the love of writing and journalism seems to have come full circle anyway, and I now write a weekly column and write books, so that never went away. But I think at various times in my career, I've been asked to do things that I haven't felt ready for, or that have really required a bit of a gut call, is this the right thing? I have no idea, but I'm going to jump into it. And I was working in a large corporate law firm when I was sort of in my early 30s, and got offered a role with a startup of psychologists. And, that was a massive change. So that was another sliding door moment, because I went on to become the CEO of that business. And so it opened up opportunities. Being asked to become the acting chair of the ABC overnight by the Prime Minister was an unexpected opportunity that, I said yes because someone needed to do it, and I felt I could. But there's just so many times like that. And so for anyone listening, we all suffer from imposter syndrome. I still do. It doesn't matter what your bio says or what you've done or haven't done. We all still have those twinges of, I don't think I'm the best person, or am I ready for this, or am I going to stuff it up? But I guess I've learned throughout my life to say yes anyway, and to trust in myself, and to think, well, I've got no reason to think I won't be able to do this. Let's just see what happens.
Thank you for making that point. Do you think that, I'm interested to know, do you think starting your career in the military, in the Defence Force, at that time when I'm imagining that you would have been in the minority as a female, do you think that was a factor in being, needing to step forward as a female in that environment played a role in your later career moves?
Well, interestingly, I think if anything, it reinforced unhelpful attitudes about the need to fit in. So because I was at ADFA, and then I went to a squadron, I was an Air Force officer, and I was always one of only a handful of women, if any. I learnt to get on and succeed by hoping no one noticed I was female at all. And so I'm what I call a late onset feminist. It took me a couple of decades to realize this untapped resource of brilliant women around me. And rather than having it reinforced when you are in the minority that the few women are competing for the few roles, realizing that in fact we're way more powerful when we work together, that was something that took me a while to realize. And I think as soon as your eyes are open to the fact that women are just so extraordinarily wonderful, and we do seek each other's support, but often we do so in ways outside of work that we don't give it the credit it's due. And you mentioned the Celebrating Women campaign. After that, I wrote a book with Catherine Fox called Womankind, all about unlocking the power of women supporting women. And it's all about this idea about how much we support one another. But in that book, Catherine, I think, came out of the womb a feminist, whereas I am very open. It took me a long time to realize the benefits of that. And I think both approaches are still quite common. You know, there's a lot of younger women that say, I don't want to be known as a female admin professional. I just want to be an admin professional. And I can understand that. I guess my encouragement, though, is to realize it's actually joining together with those around you that'll help you all succeed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I will put a link to both your books in the show notes because, yes, I haven't. It's a really good point. I haven't actually read your
Oh, you'll love it. It's all about celebrating women and how that came about, but most importantly about the power of women supporting women.
Yeah, no, thank you. Okay, so congratulations on the release of Head and Heart. You can see from my post-it notes, because I am an old-fashioned post-it note and highlighter girl. And you will be pleased to know that I also have the Audible version, which congratulations, because I'm so impressed that you managed to record the Audible version yourself. For those,
it was lots of fun. I really enjoyed it. And can I tell you, my daughter, who's 23, has been listening to the Audible version on her way to and from work. And I said to her the other day, is it weird listening to your mum reading it? And she said, oh, sometimes I forget I'm listening to a book. It feels like I'm listening to you talking. So it was a lot of fun. So thank you. And thank you for highlighting and post-it noting. There's nothing better for an author than to see their books being graffitied with notes. It's wonderful.
Yep, no, I'm a massive post-it noter and highlighter, and I even have them all color-coded because I'm a bit anal like that. So I just want to, listeners will have heard me rave about it in the intro, but for their benefit, I would love you to tell them in your own words, what can they expect from reading it, and why is it unlike any other book on leadership? Because they will know, if they've listened to me for long enough and if they've done any of my training, I always have a reading list. I recommend other books on leadership. I have interviewed other leadership experts on the podcast. Why is your book different?
It's always so much pressure to answer that. Maybe it's not, Liz. Maybe it's not. I'm telling you, you tell them. Look, I'm acutely aware there's something like 60,000 leadership books available on Amazon. So that's a pretty crowded market to enter into. But what I wanted to do was, firstly, in Australia, a lot of the significant and successful leadership books are written by Americans, and they're very good books, but they're not from an Australian perspective. And I thought there is a space for an Australian view on what it means to be a modern leader. And I also, I guess I feel I'm in a unique position because I've not only got 30 years of leadership experience, but I've gone and done a PhD in leadership, and I understand the theories and research behind where leadership can go. And so this book is a mix of both my own research and my own experience. And I hope it also interviews such a range of people that are not the norm of corporate leaders. There are some corporate leaders in there, like the CEO of BHP, but there's also teachers and activists and people who are just from completely different backgrounds.
I just want to commend you on that, because that is definitely something that I absolutely loved about it. The range of people that are examples of leadership. From the get-go, the fact that the very first person that you cite as an example of leadership is a retail assistant. That is such a wonderful story. The way that retail assistant demonstrated leadership in that moment of what was a difficult customer situation. Was such a wonderful story. I love that.
And so often we don't think about people as leaders unless they have the fancy corner office and the fancy title and, the big paycheck. And that comes from centuries of having it ingrained in us that leaders looked a certain way. They were generally men, and they were generally white men, and they had power and authority, and they liked to pretend they had all the answers as well. And so we've had that ingrained into us. And I think what I'm advocating is that a modern leader is all of us. Now, clearly that supermarket checkout operator, the retail assistant, had very different responsibilities to the CEO of the supermarket company. However, we can all lead in our responsibilities and in our way. And that's why, I'm such an advocate that admin professionals, or whatever it is your role is, you might not feel like you're much of a leader sometimes. And often that's because you're working for a terrible boss who may not value or respect the contribution you bring, yet you are leading and you're influencing those around you through your words and your actions and behaviors. And even if we forget about work, you're leading in your homes as well, whether you're part of a family, whether you've got children, whether you're caring for someone elderly, or if you're in the community volunteering. We are all impacting others every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I feel that readers and my listeners can really get out of this book. And I want to move on to talk about the thing that they can do without even reading the book is go and do the Head and Heart leader, the quiz that I will have a link in the show notes for. But one of the things that you can do, listeners, is you can go and complete this quiz that Kirstin has made available. And I have done it. And so Kirstin and I are going to talk about my results. So it is called the Head and Heart Leader Scale. So as Kirstin said, this book is rooted, that's a very unfortunate word. It's a very masculine word. But it's embedded in research that you've done at the university, at Queensland University, and this head and heart scale. So I found it fascinating to be assessed in terms of these leadership attributes and see them in terms of, weigh them up in terms of what you and I have discussed in terms of my power skills, that my listeners know. When I talk about power skills, I'm talking about your supercharged soft skills. So I loved reading about your Head and Heart Leader Scale, and I found it really fascinating to see what my results came out to be. So Kirstin, you've had a look at my results. So what's your comment be about my results?
Yeah, well, let's sort of give everyone a bit of context about what we're looking at. And I know it'll be in the show notes, but you just visit headheartleader.com and it takes about 5 minutes and you'll get a personalised report. But when I talk about leading with the head and the heart, I did identify 4 attributes of leading with the head and 4 of leading with the heart. And the 4 leading with the head are around curiosity, and that's really being curious about anything. Wisdom, which is all about decision-making. Perspective, which is about being able to read a room. And then capability, which is not just having the capability, but really believing you've got the capability to do what you do as well. And then the 4 of the heart are around humility, self-awareness, courage to speak up for what you believe in, and empathy. And the idea is that the art of modern leadership is knowing which of these attributes are needed and when, and we've all got them. So even those leaders you work with who have no empathy that appears visible at all at work, they probably have a lot of empathy in their home life, with their children, in their community. And so my encouragement for all of us is to integrate the kind of leader you are at home and at work, wherever you are. Now, the point of the scale is to help you understand where you currently sit as according to your own self-assessment. And so the idea is you can jump on, answer 24 questions, and your results will be compared to a sample group of about 1,000 leaders we used to create the scale. So then if we have a look at your results, Liz, you're off the scale in terms of curiosity and self-awareness. And so what that tells me is I'm not at all surprised, because you have a podcast as well and you like to interview people, but you just have a genuine thirst to fill gaps in your knowledge, and you accept you don't know everything, and you're just always seeking to learn and rethink what you thought you knew. And then your self-awareness is also off the scale, and that just means you've got a really high insight into your character and the impact that you're having on those around us. And I think you're probably also willing to challenge or change what doesn't feel right, in your interactions with people. On the other side, wisdom is one that you scored the least in. And can I reassure you, that is my least as well. So
freaked out by that.
No, don't be freaked out by any of them. And none of these are a pass fail. Like, it's just, you've got all of them. It's just that this one, relative to some of the others, you have self-assessed as being lower. Now, wisdom is this ability to weigh up sort of what's known and unknown, risk and reward, look for data and evidence, and then find the best way forward. Now, if you're anything like me, I'm really quick to make decisions, and I don't find it hard to make decisions, but I don't always weigh up the best way forward. And I reckon probably 90% of the time it's fine. But then I do have a bunch of decisions I think, I probably could have thought that one through just a little bit better. I haven't really thought of the consequences. So that's why, for me, it's my one I could probably work on the most. And then the other one that you might want to really think about how that looks for you is perspective, because the research I did found that attribute really has a special quality. If you score highly in perspective, it correlated the most with all the other attributes. You're more likely to score highly in the others. And perspective is really understanding the environment or the context you're leading in. It's about being able to, read a room, see a few steps forward, see who's missing from the room, and also what's going on outside of the room. So that's definitely one for you to think about. But I noticed overall, the scores give you the report that says you're more of a heart-based leader. Is that what you would have predicted going into it?
It is, yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So sometimes people are quite surprised, but I wasn't surprised to see that was your overall. So I'd really encourage people to do it, because it'll rank the 8 attributes, and it's just a point in time as well. You might do this again next week and get a different result if you've been focusing on something else, and you feel you're really handling different situations in a different way. It's not designed to lock you in forever. But it's designed for you to know that actually, I might need to think about how I'm making decisions in this particular situation I've got coming up, maybe. And the book goes through templates and different things you can use to help you make decisions. And so I need to do the same, just so you know.
Thanks, Kirstin. That's very reassuring. I want to encourage listeners to I can absolutely encourage them to get a copy of the book, because I found each chapter I just wanted to just go back and reread, and my post-it notes just kept building. But I honestly felt for the EAs in my community, I really felt like the chapter on perspective, it was so interesting that I personally that was one of my areas, the lowest areas for me. And yet for me, I felt that for EAs, that was such an area of opportunity for EAs to really invest in terms of an opportunity for them to build their capability in, because that's where they can really add value for the executive, for the leader that they're supporting, in terms of being able to read the room and look for the gaps and be that sort of couple of steps ahead. So I thought that was such a fascinating chapter.
Oh, good. Yeah. And perspective's the term I use, but it's really reading the room is the way to think about it. And of course it can be the physical room, but it's more likely to be the team you work in, the culture of the organization, the family, like the world, whatever the context is that you're working in.
Yeah. Now I'm conscious of time, so I want to finish off with a question about your EA, Louisa. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to quote you from the acknowledgement in your book, where you say about Louisa that you could not do your work without her by your side, and I'm paraphrasing here, and that you describe her as having grace, professionalism, and patience. So can you just tell us, because I love to shine a light on the partnerships between leaders and their EAs. What other head and heart leadership qualities does Louisa demonstrate?
I mean, I really have always had this view with people who have worked with me. And she doesn't work for me. In my mind, we are a partnership. And I think EAs or chiefs of staff, that's Louisa's title now. She's my chief of staff because it more accurately describes what she does. And, she absolutely thinks a few steps ahead. So she'll also be the person who can call me out and challenge my thinking on things where I get too excited and I'm saying yes to too many things. And she knows that I'm going to regret saying yes to things. She's the one that has, and it hopefully doesn't take too much courage, but she's willing to say, actually, do you really want to do that? Is this a good choice for you? And I value that so much because, you only have a few really trusted people in your life, and you need the person who is supporting you and working with you to be that person. And so I just could not do what I do without having Louisa. And I hopefully she knows this. I hope she listens to this actually. But I am also wanting anyone who's listening who has an EA and doesn't tell their EA or their admin professional how much they value them, to go and do so, because it is such an important relationship. And so many times I notice people are not using their admin professionals in a way that can really be beneficial to both of you. And if you allow them to work autonomously and to exhibit all the capabilities that they can bring and to be curious about ways that they can do things better, your life will benefit, but it'll also just mean that there's this incredible partnership of the two of you that can take on the world. So from my perspective, Louisa has all of those attributes and calls me out on things, and that's what I'm so grateful for.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Well, I will be extending an invitation to Louisa to come on the podcast to talk about her role as your chief of staff. I always love to do that.
Yeah, I'd love her to do that.
Kirstin,
I'm not sure whether she will want to, but
I know that it's always good to call people on it and see, come on, step into the light. No,
she deserves every bit of spotlight.
She does. Now, we're going to finish up with you telling listeners. So, of course, I will put the links for them to find the book. Where would you like them to go and search for the book if they wanted to purchase the book? Where would there be a place for them to look for the book?
Well, they'll find it everywhere. It's in all good bookstores, and it's on Audible and Kindles and all of that. But if you go to headheartleader.com, all the links are there. So go to the shop and it'll direct you to Booktopia or Amazon or wherever you like. And you can also go and do the Head Heart Leader scale while you're there.
Excellent. I will put all those links in the show notes. Kirstin, is there any final thoughts that you would like to leave the listeners with?
I just want to remind you that you are leaders. That's all, that you are role models, whether you realize it or not. And, being a modern leader is not about being perfect. We all get it wrong every day. I know I do. And that's part of having that humility to recognize, there's always more we can learn. So I just want to thank all the listeners that you've got for the jobs they do and for being there as leaders to others.
Thank you so much, Kirstin. It's really wonderful to have you on the podcast, and I know the listeners will get a huge amount of value from the book. But also, this is another opportunity which I love to give my listeners, for them to be able to demonstrate to their leader that they are thinking about their leaders' growth. So it's a wonderful way for them to be able to introduce their leaders to you if their leader is not aware of the book also. So
fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website, It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.